I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would everybody stand for the pledge? Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. George, you would take a roll call, please?
Councilmember Garola.
Here. I apologize for my tardiness.
Just snuck in, huh?
Yeah, my daughter.
Mayor Pro Tem Villasenor.
My daughter got lost in the soccer field.
Mayor Austin.
Here.
Councilmember Brogy.
Here.
Councilmember Mendez.
Here. Okay, somebody move to approve the agenda.
I will make a motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion. I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. We're moving on to public comment, but we're not going to have public comments except for the one item tonight. You can read that under the public comments per what government code that is too. So we're going to move on to number 6, new business. So everyone is aware we have a Spanish speaker translator here for the audience if they need to be. Erica, would you repeat that in Spanish for me?
Si hay alguien en la audiencia que necesita interpretación, tenemos un intérprete y está sentado al lado derecho y por favor notifíquenos. Gracias.
Okay, we're going to move on to 6A, second public hearing to receive input regarding the adoption of a district-based election system.
Thank you, Mayor. As you just mentioned, this is our second public hearing. At this, I want to invite Kristen Parks from the National Demographics Corporation to give a presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. I know you all had the opportunity on Tuesday to meet my colleague, Dr. Justin Levitt. My name is Kristen Parks, and I am part of your demographer team at National Demographics. I've worked with many of the cities in Ventura County, and it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. So, a lot of what I'm going to present you already heard on Tuesday, and we are required as part of this process to repeat ourselves, so please indulge me. We are going to cover a little bit more of the California Voting Rights Act because I understand that this is something that a lot of the members of the public are interested in hearing a little more about. So I'll go a little bit more into that. We'll talk about the legally required process and timelines for Fillmore, as well as the legal requirements for the districts themselves. We'll look at the city's demographic profile, and then what's new this evening is that we do have the public mapping tool that we just launched today. So I will do a very brief demonstration of how to use that tool, and then council may open the public hearing and take comments from members of the public. So, of course, the transition from at-large to by-district elections is occurring in Fillmore for the same reason that it's occurred in almost 200 cities across California, which is the California Voting Rights Act. And this is a law that's over 20 years old, but as we've seen over time, more and more lawsuits and potential lawsuits or demand letters have been sent to cities in recent years. So Fillmore is not alone in receiving one of these letters in August of this year. And on October 10th, City Council did adopt a resolution of intent saying, hey, we intend to transition to by-district elections. What that does is it opens a safe harbor period so that the city cannot be sued while the process is going on. So, of course, in many smaller cities, at-large seems to make sense. At-large elections are when all of the voters have the opportunity to elect every member of the council. By-district elections change that to voters within each district are electing one member of the council who's residing within that district. All this being said, we've worked with a number of cities even smaller than Fillmore who have successfully made this transition and actually found candidates and filled their seats. So we're confident it can work out, but we also understand sometimes the frustration, particularly that the public can feel when feeling as though you're doing this under duress. That being said, what's good about doing this under the safe harbor period is that it allows the public the opportunity to participate in the actual determination of city council boundaries, rather than the risk of actually going to court and having a judge impose a map at which no point the public is able to participate in the determination of those boundaries. So many of us are familiar with the Federal Voting Rights Act. This is the landmark legislation from 1965. The California Voting Rights Act is sort of modeled on the Federal Voting Rights Act, but there are some significant differences, and these differences actually make it a lot easier for plaintiffs to bring cases under the California Voting Rights Act than the Federal Voting Rights Act. And we've even seen cities, I think Santa Maria is an example, where plaintiffs tried to bring a Federal Voting Rights Act case against the city, and federal courts dismissed it. However, when they brought a claim under the California Voting Rights Act, that was not dismissed. So what we see is that this law is making it easier to force cities into by-district election systems. The Federal Voting Rights Act has 4 factual tests. So in order to have standing in a federal case, you have to meet all 4 of these things. And for the California Voting Rights Act, 2 of those tests are eliminated. And so the only thing remaining is these 2 middle questions: does the protected class vote as a block, meaning do they vote in general in the same way? And then, do the voters who are not part of that protected class also vote in a block, right? Meaning vote together in the same way to defeat preferred candidates of the protected class. So this significantly lowers the bar. And so the concept of violating the California Voting Rights Act is established just by these 2 tests, which we talk about as being the presence of racially polarized voting and dilution of the protected class's voting strength. So a lot of people say, well, what about, all the totality of circumstances? Well, that's eliminated. Does it matter if the protected class is actually geographically concentrated and large enough to constitute the majority of a potential district? Nope, that's off the table as well. So not to go too far into legalese, I will say I am not an attorney, and your city does have legal counsel that will be your expert in the legal aspect of this. I do think the public deserves to understand why we see so many cities in California facing this exact same situation. And even within just looking at Santa Barbara and Ventura County, before this law was passed, all cities were at large. So we're showing this here as a map. Today, the only city in the 2 counties that remains with at-large elections is Port Hueneme, and I'm not sure if they're going to receive a demand letter. We'll see. Maybe they already have, but even tiny Ojai, Buellton, and Solvang were forced into by-district elections. So probably you all are aware of all of this, and some of these cities as well dealing with the same attorney. Talking about the financial impact of this is that we have seen a number of cities over the years take these cases to court and fight. Unfortunately, no jurisdiction has ever won a case. So what that means is that not only would you be paying the legal fees in court, there's often an additional settlement that must be paid to the plaintiffs. And you can see, for instance, in the city of Palmdale, this was as high as $4.7 million. We often talk about a city needing a minimum of $2 million to even decide to fight one of these cases. And we like to tell this sort of funny story from the city of Murrieta. And they had about 30 members of the public come and say, you know what, we're not going to be bullied. We're going to fight this. And one of their city council members said, okay, members of the public, if you want to fight this, I hope that you will all go do a GoFundMe and produce $2 million. And if you do that, city council will vote to fight this. And, you know, of course, they came back the next meeting and the council members said, I'm looking at GoFundMe. I don't see legal fees for the city of Murrieta to fight a CVRA lawsuit. So for many of the clients that we work with, it's clear that they are trying to make a fiscally prudent decision. And really, we always say we'd much rather you spend your budget on keeping your city safe and beautiful, as we really enjoy it being, and not throwing money into this. So beyond the minimum, right, that you can get away with. So that being said, if we all agree we're commencing this process, we're actually at the second hearing that would comply with the requirements of 2 public hearings that exist with the purpose of both educating the public and listening. So I am here to listen to council and the public give me feedback, because I'm going to take that back and work to create, with my team, to create some draft city council maps. And the exciting thing is that we also are just going to completely open that process up to the public, so that not only will the council be able to consider maps drawn by your consultant, but also maps drawn by members of the public. So I'm suggesting for members of the public who are wanting to draw your own city council districts and have those be considered formally as part of this process, it's a short turnaround, but if you can get those done by next Friday, November 1st, we can guarantee that those will be able to be published in the 7-day window required. And so in order for council to actually be able to consider your map, it has to be posted online by November 7th. And the reason we usually take a week, but we'll see how quickly we can turn around maps, is because we do need to process them and make sure that they are all uniform. The other thing that we do as demographers is we run a demographic report on each council district in your proposed map. So we're going to provide all that information to council. That will all be published on the website. I hope you've all seen the city already has an excellent website on district-based elections and the transition process. This is where all the maps will be posted. And then there will be 2 hearings in November to discuss those maps. And that's really an opportunity for the public to express which maps they prefer, and for the council to request any revisions or changes to maps. You know, sometimes council will say, we really like, you know, the teal map and the purple map, different things about them. Can you try to combine them or something? So we will take direction, hopefully, on November 14th, and if necessary, on November 28th, to make any revisions necessary to those maps. And then council will introduce an ordinance and adopt that map before the end of the year. And the good thing about getting this done before the end of the year is that our friends up in Sacramento have actually passed another law regulating this process that will go into effect in January with additional requirements. So that won't apply to you until after the 2030 census, because you're going to complete this process in 2023. The first elections that would actually be by district will be held in 2024, but what we see is a rollout process. So in 2026, you'll have completed all of your by district elections. So every seat will be by district. In between 2024 and 2026, you'll have some members who are still serving at large and some who are by district. So when we're talking about the actual district boundaries themselves, we are working first and foremost always with federal law, the supreme law of the land. And the most important thing for us to ensure is that there is equal population across all 5 districts. Federal courts have said that some deviation is permissible, so these districts don't have to be exactly equal in population size. So we will show you what that deviation is for each of the proposed maps and ensure that it complies. We talk about the Federal Voting Rights Act here. We do also need to make sure that there is no dilution of protected classes' voting power. And finally, that while we may be looking at racial and ethnic data, we are not going to draw any districts based solely on race. So that's our federal law. The state of California has given us 4 criteria in order of importance that must be considered. And the first one's pretty basic, geographic contiguity. That just means each council district should be a complete district with no holes or disconnected parts. So that one's usually pretty easy to do. Second is districts should minimize the division of neighborhoods and communities of interest. And what that means is, to the extent possible, we want to think of a council district as being a council district's going to contain 1 or more neighborhoods. And state law says we really shouldn't draw a boundary line down the middle of a neighborhood and split it into 2 council districts, unless for some reason that neighborhood comes to council and says, yes, please divide us. We want to be divided. So this is why we request public testimony on neighborhoods and communities within the city. Even in a small city, we know that there's homes built in different decades and areas around certain parks or schools that identify as separate and unique communities. Of course, you can just go onto Nextdoor and see all, a million different sub-neighborhoods or areas of your city. Third, state law says we should draw boundary lines that are easily identifiable by residents, meaning we want everyone who lives in Fillmore to be able to understand where the council district lines are. So rather than having those lines go, between 2 people's backyards, they really should go along a significant road or a creek or hills or something that everyone is familiar with. Finally, last on the list of importance is that to the extent possible, we want to try to draw council districts that are compact. And state law says a compact shape for a district is one that does not avoid a nearby area to include a further away area. So something that doesn't meet the compactness rule would be something that's sort of snaking around. I have seen situations where we would draw a district that's not compact. Maybe it's sort of a nice shape and then it has a really weird arm, but the reason for that was actually to comply with one of these higher ordered criterion. So the idea that there was a community of interest or a neighborhood that actually stretched all along this one area, so that was more important than compactness. So this is the complexity of state law that we're dealing with here. And finally, we can't look at partisan data because these districts can't be found to favor or discriminate against a political party. And we've already seen, I believe, at least one court case on that particular issue. So we don't even look at partisan data, and we don't make it available in our online mapping tool. Okay, a lot of information. When we're talking about the population numbers, we're also required by law to use the 2020 census official counts. Even though we're in 2023, we're using those numbers. For your city, the total is 16,462 residents. And when you divide that by 5, you get really an ideal size for each council district of 3,292 people. It sounds kind of small. I worked with a town in Northern California that had about 5,000 residents, and each of their districts contained under 1,000 people. So it's possible to accomplish. We also have other data that's a little more recent than 2020. We have information on voter registration from 2022 and voter turnout from 2022, broken down by race and ethnicity. And then on the right side of the slide, we have information that comes from the American Community Survey conducted by the Census Bureau. And that's a running average of 5 years worth of data. So this is 2017 to 2021. And you know, when you look at this, you do see that Fillmore does have a large Latino population, 77% as of the 2020 census. When we're talking about these voting rights laws, we tend to look at the citizen voting age population. That's just the estimated percentage of citizens over 18 that are within each of those protected class groups. So our Latino CVAP, or citizen voting age population, is 63%. So what that means is that we will likely see some districts that are majority Latino voters within this city, within those proposed districts. All of this is kind of boring to look at on a chart, so I hope that members of the public will also interact with our online maps, because you can see this geographically, and that's where it gets to be a little more interesting. 39%, for instance, of the households in Fillmore are renters. So you can look at the map and see where those are. I'll show you some of this on maps. So when we're looking at where the Latino potential voters are living, you can certainly see the density of those communities really just along the main center of town here, but really also spread throughout all of Fillmore. When you look at Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, you do have just a few census blocks that have more than 25% of the citizens 18 and older identifying as Asian American Pacific Islander. Those are on the southwest side of the city here. And then there's that one block with just 12 people that has, 4 of them identifying as API. We also know that about half of the households in this city speak Spanish at home, so we can see where those geographic concentrations are here as well, with the darker blue and the lighter blue and the green and the yellow, in that order, being the most concentrations in our heat map here. And as I mentioned, we can look at where renters are, and we see really they're kind of spread out across the whole city. And then on the right side, we can see where households, what percentage of households rather have incomes of $75,000 per year and more. So that gives us a little bit of socioeconomic information. All of this information is only valuable insofar as it can help members of the public identify where their neighborhoods and communities. We are also going to provide all of this data with each draft map so that you can compare maps to each other and each of the 5 council districts. So how can the public participate? Well, we have an online mapping tool that's actually quite easy to use, totally free. I'll very, very quickly show you how to use it. And we also have a 5-minute tutorial video on YouTube. All this is on the city's website. But if you really hate doing anything online and you still want to draw a map, we welcome the public to really submit any map, hand-drawn or otherwise, as long as you're actually identifying your council district boundaries by using street names or landmarks. So what the advantage of this tool is that it will allow you to look at the population numbers to ensure that you're creating 5 districts that are equal in population size. So let me show you very briefly how to use this tool. So it's called DRA 2020. Really, a guy named Dave created this many, many, many years ago. It's actually a very reputable tool that up until very recently was only used for congressional district drawing. The only barrier to accessing this tool is that you have to create an account. Okay, so all you need to create an account is an email address. Put in your email address, a password, go to your email, click verify, and then you can log in. Okay, so I'm logged in, and once you're logged in, you can actually go to the city's webpage. I'm gonna maybe not do it that way, but there is a link on the city's webpage you can click. But I'm actually going to show you how to do it if you don't want to go through the city's webpage. You go to Maps, and I'm going to go to All Published Maps. It's saying, oh, wow, we have over 30,000 maps on our website. But when I type in Fillmore, you're going to find NDC's template. So you can double-click on this, and it's going to open the template that you can use to draw your own districts. You can't draw directly on the template. It does say view only, right? So you click this button right next to it, make an editable copy, and that's going to make a copy of that map that I can edit. And there's a lag time because there's a ton of data on the back end for every single census block. So it's loading up all of that. I can double click on it, or I can click the check box and click edit. You'll notice it's called copy of. If I want to rename it, I can rename it, but let's just go into editing it. So the main thing to be aware of here is the population numbers. So you're going to be looking in this district selector box to see which district you're drawing, and it's going to give you this wonderful running total of how many people you're assigning to it. And it's going to tell you exactly how many additional or fewer people you need in order to reach that target of around 3,292. So right now it's selecting, it says we're gonna be drawing District 1. It defaults to showing us precincts. You can see there's not very many precincts in the city. We really wanna see blocks. So we're gonna click on block. And then we'll click the paintbrush, because this is how we draw the districts. And once I click on the precinct, it will show me the blocks. Or it should. I can zoom in. There we go. And so the way to assign any of these blocks to a district, so now I'm assigning to District 2, it'll be green, is literally just to click on them. You can hover over it. And if you want to see some details of the block you're hovering over, you can have these details show up on the screen, and it will actually tell you, here's this block, it says O. You know, it'll tell you how many people are there, as well as the citizen voting age population. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a great question. The blocks are sometimes completely ridiculous because they are a vestige from the United States Census Bureau. Many of them were drawn in the 1980s and have not necessarily been updated. However, they're the smallest geographic unit we have available to us for this process, because they're the unit at which the Census Bureau actually records population. So you still probably have over 100 blocks within your city, and we can actually show the population of them here on the map. So there's 26 people, there's 99 people. In addition to clicking, I can actually click and drag, okay? What does it say? It says I've created way too big of a district. It says I've put 4,589 too many people, right? So I can click the eraser and erase. Okay. Now I'm a little bit closer to the ideal population, but what's wrong with this green district? It's not meeting the #1 state criteria, that it has to be one whole piece. Let's say you didn't know that, and you thought maybe this was okay. You can click on this lovely Analyze button, and the Analyze button is just loading. It's gonna tell you, hey, you made a mistake. So that's a really nice thing about this tool, is that it will tell you, hey, your map doesn't look so good. When you're done, let's say you do draw, good contiguous districts that are appropriate in population size, and you wanna go ahead and submit it to the city. You want it to be formally considered, right? At any point in this process, by the way, you can walk away from this map and you can come back to it and it will automatically be saved. It'll say it was modified 7:03 p.m. So it automatically saves it for you. When you're ready to submit it, you're gonna click the share button, and it's gonna give you a shareable URL that you can just click to copy. Then all you do is paste that into an email, and you're going to email district elections at fillmore.ca.gov, I think. I do have it in my PowerPoint, so I can show
It's
you.
actually district elections at fillmoreca.gov.
There we go, at fillmoreca.gov. So I know that was a super quick introduction to the tool. There is a step-by-step instruction list on the website, as well as I mentioned, a 5-minute YouTube video that I narrate where I go in a little more depth into how to use this tool. But if you just wanted to even print out this screen and draw on it and submit it to us, take a picture of what you printed out, email it, we will accept anything that you give us, and we will try to draw a map out of it, because we very often see that our clients that use these public tools often end up adopting a map drawn by a member of their community, which, even though we're demographers and experts, we think that that's often the best, because the people who live in Fillmore know Fillmore better than a consultant that's, showing up a few times for meetings. So I want to encourage people to use the tool, and I certainly hope to see maps. Again, you can email them here. And then the next public hearing won't occur until November 14th, but we will be updating the website a week prior. So all of the maps that will be considered will be available online there. If council has any other questions, I know you heard sort of one version on Tuesday from Justin, and now you heard my version, so hopefully everything lines up. But any questions, I'm happy to answer now from council.
Any questions by council?
I do have an initial one. I think you maybe misspoke, said Friday, November 1st. I believe November 1st is next Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. What date would they actually be due, just so we can clarify for the public?
Oh, I would like the public to have at least a week. So what date is next Friday?
It's November 3rd.
Okay, yes, November 3rd then. And, that's not legally binding. That's just in terms of our workload, so that if everyone in this room submits a map, if they can submit it by November 3rd, I can make sure it's available for council 7 days prior to the meeting, right? So the deadline's really just to serve the public, to make sure your map gets considered.
Any other questions?
I do have another one here. I know the population breakout should be nearly equal. I think you said within 10%. Does the voting age population play into that? Because there's probably likely areas that would maybe have younger families, or maybe not as many voting age population if the rest were equal.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So legally, we are working with total population, which, as you know, includes everyone, babies, non-citizens, everyone. What it doesn't include, well, you don't have a state prison here, but you might have residents, hopefully you don't, that are somewhere else in a state prison. And if they listed Fillmore as their last address, it will include them. So legally, we have to consider total population. However, you are permitted to consider, you might want to ensure that there are a somewhat equal amount of voters from one district to another. That's why we provide that data. So you're required to consider one. The other one is permissible or legal to consider.
Thank you.
Would you mind going back to one of the first slides that had a breakdown of the criteria? I think it was one of the first or second slides. I'll watch as we. What I'm wondering, I thought I heard you say that the goal, and we should not be looking at ethnicity for boundary, keeping.
Oh, yeah, this one?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think based on this, I can ask my question. And this might be a dollar late and a dime short on asking this, but can you share, in your opinion, what the purpose of this is then? If ultimately we're trying to, I thought, get people who could possibly be disenfranchised involved or represented.
Yes, and that is the stated purpose of the California Voting Rights Act. However, the CVRA is only talking about whether the elections are at large versus by district. There's actually nothing in that law about the districts themselves and what they have to look like. So that is actually coming from separate law. The California law is called the Fair Maps Act. It is, as I mentioned, going to be updated again as of January with a new set of requirements. But when we're talking about race and ethnicity, that's coming into play primarily in our federal law. And usually under federal law, we do look to see, is it possible to create majority-minority districts? So as demographers, that's one part of our process. We look and we see, can you create majority-minority districts? And if you can create them, you know, are they appropriate for the city, right? They're not violating any of these other things. However, even though we should look at that to see where the geographic concentrations of protected classes are, we should never draw a district solely based on race. So that's something that federal courts have called gerrymandering, racial gerrymandering. If the only rationale for that district is that it creates a majority of one race, then that would be very problematic. And I've actually seen maps that appear to do that, that have sometimes come from interest groups or whatever. You can sort of see they're picking and choosing one block, and so their lines are real jagged. And you say, why are you not including this block? And if you overlay the race, you can sometimes see that. So we are not going to do that. We're going to take into consideration all of these other factors. Oftentimes neighborhoods and communities are a group of people that may have similar race, ethnicity, language, shared history, culture, etc. And, you know, those are not single factors. It's not just race. Under the California criteria, we try to look at a lot of different characteristics that might make up a neighborhood or a community.
Yeah, I'm just shaking my head only because it seems to me that Fillmore is so diverse anyway. You know, it's such a conglomeration, every neighborhood, every street. I don't know how this is going to get done.
Yeah, I've worked with other cities, right? So I just finished working with the city of Soledad, 90% Latino, every single council member currently Latino. Well, LULAC sent them a demand letter, and they converted from at-large to by district. Is it going to change the representation on their council? Probably not based on race. I will say, if you are in some of these cities where, and we see this a lot, where maybe all the council members sort of live in a couple neighborhoods, you know, I've worked with cities where there was no one from this, you know, northern section of the city ever had been on the council. So you will get geographic diversity. Will you get more other diversity? That is not a guarantee. The only thing that districts can guarantee you is geographic diversity. Is that the stated intent of the CVRA? Not really. So yeah, we can have some head-scratching moments. We're right there with you.
Do you have any questions, Albert? Okay, I have one question. If we have some areas in the city that are not fully developed, like Heritage Valley, how will we account for the houses that will be coming down the pike?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Is that the development that's in the sort of southeast area? Okay, so the way we tend to deal with that is we tend to make sure that then when we're drawing a district in that area, we're going to make sure we don't overpopulate that district. We'll try to underpopulate it. We can only really underpopulate it maybe 1 or 2 percentage points, but that's a lot better than overpopulating it if you know that it's about to have, you know, in 2030 it's going to have a lot more people than it has right now. And the advantage to doing that is that when you or future council members in 2031 revisit the boundary lines, if we've done a good enough job of accounting for that new development and some of that growth, you may not have to change your district boundaries very much at all the next time around, right? And you can be like, I worked in 2021 with Simi Valley, and they didn't have to change anything. They just reapproved the exact same boundaries they'd approved, a few years prior, because the population hadn't changed dramatically enough.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open the public hearing. We ask for 3 minutes for speaker. When it gets to, you have 30 seconds left, the yellow light will come on, and then when your time is up, the red light will come on. Our first speaker is Regina Stelly. And you, and you got that letter submitted in?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm reading for Gracie Guzman Sanchez tonight,
Okay.
who lives in Bardstown. What we need are people from our own hometown to represent us, people who are concerned about the well-being of not only their town, but those who live in it, all of them, all who live in the town. People who actually know what it's like to live in a town, a small town, and send their kids to the schools here and shop in the same stores. I don't believe anybody from the outside world would understand or frankly care. So please let Fillmore take care of Fillmore. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Regina Staley Nunez, and I reside at 1371 Cliff, and have lived most of my life in Fillmore. It seems like every 6 months or so, some kind of craziness is having to be dealt with by our community and council. But this situation is different. It just is. We have a group of people coming into our town to deliberately divide us, to balkanize our community by way of district voting. So instead of our elected representatives voting for the best of our entire town, those elected to their districts know only their own constituents and vote for the issues that only affect that part of the town. There's no understanding of community as a whole, but rather a pitting of one district, part of a town, against another. The very understanding of the word community is lost with this direction of governance. We have a group of outsiders coming in here to say we have it all wrong. They judge us as undemocratic, that our community shows economic, ethnic, gender, racial inequality, that we must, at the risk of lawsuit, change to district voting to bring equity and equality by way of this group of lawyers empowered by state mandate. And it is expected to be used on huge California metropolises and insanely the same on small towns. I'm not saying Fillmore is perfect, but this label of us is just plain wrong and does not represent our town. Today, I stand before a Fillmore City Council that is 3 out of 5 Hispanic, 2 out of 5 female. Are we going to let these state-mandated lawyers label and dismiss us? We Fillmoreans are proud of how far we've come and where we are going, that we stand up for our families and walking in truth. Last night, I was thinking about the amazing people who built this town, the likes of Ari Larson, Lani Gallardo-Farr, Ernie Morales. These citizens of our town embodied the understanding that in unity is strength, in division is weakness, that ultimately we live for others' sake rather than the pursuit of money and power. So to you who are pushing this district voting mess,
Regina, please wrap it up.
I can only say shame on you. Shame on you for coming in here to divide and denigrate this community that Adi, Lonnie, and Ernie, and all of us here love and cherish. And shame on me if I don't follow their example to help stand up against this mess. God bless you, City Council, in the coming days with wisdom and courage to live out that wisdom for our community of Fillmore. Thank you.
No clapping, please. Just because it interrupts the flow of it's supposed to be a council meeting. It's not supposed to be a clapping festival. Next speaker is Gabrielle Candelario.
It's Gabriel.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I kept looking at it, trying to figure it out.
It's okay. My name is Gabriel Candelario. I've lived in Fillmore my entire life. I reside over there in Ventura Street, right next to where the sewer and all that stuff was going on. So I was hoping that actually, you guys did a good job with communicating all of that. So anyways, I was hoping that the meetings were going to be a little less formal, that we could just kind of ask and it would be a Q&A. But I did write some of the stuff down. I do appreciate the PowerPoint that was presented to us. I was just wondering if that would be available online so anybody could read or all of that. And then in regards to the tool, I thought the tool was very good and very very sophisticated. I did just want to know that, I know that she kind of talked about how it'll let you know if there's errors on it, but I was wondering if it would stop the person from actually doing a submission. So that way we're not getting a bunch of submissions that are faulty or error. I was also wondering too if the tool itself, if you're when you're a citizen, if you want to create it, if that'll limit you only to just one submission, or can one person submit multiple drafts, I guess, of the districting. And then one of the last things was that I know that they brought it up about how the population of the registered voters and how that kind of affected it. I was wondering if that would also show, I guess, if it was equal or not, because I just feel like that's something to be concerned. And then I did just have another question. I've been to a couple of these meetings and I haven't really heard exactly how, if the districting were to happen, how the mayor would be selected, if that would still be something that, if each person was selected through was elected through their district, if it would still be something that you all would select or elect amongst yourselves, or if it would be something that one person would run for mayor and then they receive votes from all 5 districts. I'm just curious about that. So if anybody could answer that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. She's writing your questions down. We'll have her answer them once we. Next speaker is Lynn Edmonds.
Once again, I say hi, and once again, I am proud to stand here in front of you all to deal with a very difficult issue. I've been asking a lot of people that I know what their thoughts are about this, because I think it's important. And it came up that we're not dividing. So don't say we're dividing the town. We don't divide the town. One person told me by having some kids go to Rio Vista and others go to Mountain Vista. That's not dividing that town. That's coming together in commonality. And I think that person said to me that that's what this is. It's not dividing, it's setting up areas of commonality. And another person suggested how nice it would be, they might even run if it means they're only going to have to go to 3,000 homes instead of 15,000 homes if they're candidates. Another one said, it'll be nice to have someone that's familiar with my area. In the past, no one has ever represented my area, and this was a person from North Fillmore, and that there are a lot of needs that we have, and it rarely is dealt with. So that person was excited about this. Another person told me that they really appreciate, this was the person that caught me at Starbucks, and that they really would appreciate this, because then they'll know who the person is and the phone number for them to call. That they don't really know the people that are here now as much as they would like to, and this would give them the ability to do that. And then they all stated, which I thought was very interesting, and I probably spoke with 12, 15 people, even if they didn't have any other recommendations, they all said, if we do districts, every single person that wins for city council needs to know they also represent the entire city, that they don't just represent their individual, they have to look at the picture as a whole. And I thought those were very thoughtful responses, and I thought you might want to know, because these are people who feel intimidated to come, or have to stay home because they have many kids to take care of, or simply are tired and want to watch TV. I don't know. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Brandy Hollis.
Hi, you guys again. So I'm still wrapping my brain around this. It doesn't make sense to me at all, once again. So now if we have a majority Hispanic, Latino population, and we divide it up into 5 districts, and the population, each district density-wise is Hispanic, Latino, does that mean no white people get to, or Caucasians get to run and be part of city council now? Is that what we're saying? Because the attorney who filed this suit was disseated from Santa Barbara City Council for not properly representing his district, correct? So I can't think of a single area I could break down unless it was like a street or two where you're not going to be majority Hispanic. We have an amazing city council already that is so divided and so diverse, not divided, but diverse, and there's a little bit of everybody. And as far as feeling secure to run, if it was districts, there's no way I'm running for city council in this town. It's too little. Everybody knows each other's business. There is no way I'm putting myself out there. I don't care how much you divide it down. And it's a shame that we're going here, because a lot of people don't want to run for this reason. And for knowing what's going on in North Fillmore, I walk through North Fillmore just like I walk through East Fillmore, West Fillmore, South Fillmore. I know the cheese made from one city to the next block. It's all over Facebook. We all know the news, okay? And a shame on the people bringing this. You know what? They're dividing our town, and it's a shame. It's a shame to put you in this position. I also think it's a shame that if people are anyway financially procured to the people that are bringing this lawsuit, or have any financial gains, that they remove themselves immediately. I know the person that brought the suit is a executive officer for house farm workers, and I know somebody who's not here today might possibly financially be indebted to housing farm workers through themselves or their family, so I hope they continue to excuse themselves from this matter. And once again, thank you, and I'm really sorry you guys are put in this position. I think it's disgusting. I think federal law should supersede California law, but here we are in California where we have to make more laws about laws, so I'm sorry you're in this position.
Thank you. Next speaker is Luann Brock.
Good evening. I'm Luann Brock, and I live at 832 Woodgrove Road in Fillmore. And where's Joe Ramirez? Where is Joe Ramirez? Because he's filed a demand letter asserting our process for elections needs to be changed. I've never met the man. This topic has been discussed now at least 3 or 4 meetings. This has long-range effects on our community. It's costing the city money right now to go to this type of districting. One would think that if one was interested enough to send a demand letter, you would be a part of improving the process. It reminds me of the childhood game, Ring and Run. That being said, I was heavily involved when the school district went to trustee districts. I worked for 30 years for Fillmore Unified School District, and for 25 years I attended every school board meeting. I knew how it worked, And I felt at the time that they went to the trustee districts, it was a big mistake. I still feel that. But you know what we did? There are a couple people in this room, and only a couple showed up to all those 5 meetings that were required. But because they structured the meeting that we had the ability not to watch this 3-minute clock, but to raise our hand, stand up, consult, exchange ideas, we came up with maps that at the end of those 5 meetings, the board voted on. It was a 4-1 vote to go to the trustee districts, but you need to give us the ability to speak, not just for 3 minutes during public comment. I am begging you to allow us to be a part of the process, not just fill out a map on the website, but let us have back and forth, because it's through the back and forth that we're going to come forward with ideas. I have a question. When we went through it for that district, I think the rules probably are still the same. The incumbents, that those of you that work so hard to get on this council, we need to protect your spots. And I watched what happened with the school board. They tried to ace out one board member, but because we as a community, and there were only a few of us, demanded that those spots be protected in the setting of the maps, it gave you the ability to run again if, when your time is up, that you still have that ability. You've stepped forward to help us now, and we want to see you continue to do that should you do so in the future. So the maps need to be drawn with that in mind. So, and I heard the word duress and force a lot tonight, and boy, it is sad. And I am sorry for you as a council, and I am sorry for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Luis Rodriguez. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. Hello, council. I want to start off by saying I am very grateful for your guys' development of the roads lately. I think I've never in my life seen so many roads get worked on in such a short amount of time here in town. It was a big point of contention amongst community members that were very upset about it. You can't please anyone, but you guys did a great job, as well as City Works and all the contractors. I do want to point out one particular block, which is Blaine Avenue, the 800 block. I grew up on the 900 block, but running around as a kid, it's all, just north side. So one thing that's very particular about this block is that it's so narrow. It looks like an alley. It's heavily populated. There's it curves into the center of the road with an additional dip for storm drain. I'm just gonna go shoot from the hip and say that I'm sure none of you guys lived in that block, but you guys still made a very tough decision to get that road taken care of. And I always wondered, how are they even gonna take care of that road with the layout, the population, and it got done. And I want to commend the city and all the workers for that. I think that was great. Another thing I want to mention is, the limitations of where people can vote from. So you cannot vote for Fillmore if you live in the Fillmore Western Trailer Park, which is just over the river. You cannot vote for city council. You cannot, I don't believe you can vote for city council if you are in Bardesdale, let alone Piru. So there are already limitations on actual people who are in the community, how they want to vote. And what would be the purpose of any kind of interest if they don't have a say in particular districts? What would be the purpose of canvassing the whole city if you just got to focus on a couple of blocks and wipe your hands with the rest of the town? You don't even have to knock on any doors on a neighborhood that would not be able to vote for you. How are you supposed to get to know the whole community, which is such a small town? I think it will make a difficult voting process for the public who cannot even vote even more difficult and more limiting based on this map structure. Another thing I want to throw out there is really great presentation here earlier. However, it was mentioned that they don't include party affiliation. And while the person was, sorry, I don't know your name. But when she clicked on demographics, I did see that you could see the political affiliation of those demographics based on the blocks. So, I mean, it's the fact that she's not providing it doesn't mean that it cannot be used in a strange manner that way. Thank you.
Next speaker is Annette Sula.
I don't think I've ever loved a city as much as I love Fillmore. And it is breaking my heart to see what this could possibly do to us. I see no good coming out of this at all. The last time we talked about money up here, they said it was going to be $32,000. It's already gone up to $37,000, and that's $37,000, and that's in a very short period of time. They've already jacked us up $5,000 more. We don't even know if this person who did this had any right to do this, bring this. We know that he said that he was a lawyer. He's not. You know, I just don't know how we can comply with this and survive, because we're going to be subject to every single bully in the world. They're going to say, oh, you want to go for bullying? Go for Fillmore. You can get them, because they're a small town. What they don't know about Fillmore is we are a small town, but we are one in spirit. Even if we grossly disagree on certain issues, we're still all Fillmore, and we love this town, and we're working together to make it what it has been and what it can be. This is a step in the worst direction. The worst direction. I know it's scary to think that some big people with big money might come after us and try and bankrupt us, but are we going to just die without trying? Is that what we're going to do? Are we going to surrender? This is America. We fought a revolution because of the tyranny that was being placed on us. That's how we became America, because we stood up for the rights of the people. Many people died for those rights that we have, and now are we going to just surrender them because there's bullies out there? I never wanted to be on the city council, and now I really don't want to be on the city council because I know this is hard. I know every one of you loves our city. The people that are doing this hate our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Marie Alves.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. I have a few questions. So I'm just going to list them here. Does the data show that there's an increase in race and ethnicity running for office? Is there going to be an increase in race and ethnicities running for office if we do this project that Jason Dominguez and Joe Ramirez have brought to us? Is there a higher voting turnout? That's another question I would love to know. One of the things that we had up on the thing is that a criteria for cities is minimal division of neighborhoods. And I'm asking, how about a minimal division of our town? Because Los Angeles probably has districts the size of our town. Why are we breaking up our little town into 5 different districts? It doesn't make any sense to me. So what is the size of a typical voting district in LA? We're a 10-minute bike ride on the perimeter. Is it true every time a letter from Jason Dominguez goes out to a city, the city has to pay $37,000? Somebody said that earlier. Plus, we got to pay for a demographer. Does that not strike anybody as shifty? Just a little bit. And where's Joe Ramirez, like Luann had asked? And this Jason Dominguez, I just want to read something that I looked up. Who is this guy that is messing with us? I wonder if he's ever been here. He's sure not here tonight. District elections were mandated in this state to assure that citizens having large populations in certain community areas, but who are a minority overall have proper representation. That has nothing to do with Fillmore. Evidence is clear that Jason Dominguez is a district-elected politician who will consistently ignore the needs of the community as a whole. And that is a concern to me, that somebody like that is coming into our community and asking us to change our ways. I'm not sure why he's doing that. I don't know why Joe's doing that. Breaks my heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Paul Copley. His time's been given up by Diane Sutton, Rhonda Taylor, Paul Taylor, Christine Mariotti, and Sherry Wright. So you have 18 minutes, Paul. Let me switch the clock.
Thank you. I don't intend to use all 18, so. And thank you to the people who yielded their time to me. I appreciate that.
Okay, you ready to go?
Okay. Distinguished council members and staff, thank you for taking the time to hear and receive my public comments today, and for your open and thoughtful manner in addressing this admittedly stressful situation. As many have commented, I don't envy your position and the decisions you'll have to make in the coming weeks and months, and I hope that whatever path you choose works well for the citizens of Fillmore and for the Fillmore City Council. I want to first acknowledge that I am not a resident of Fillmore. I live in Oak Park, which is a small, unincorporated community in the eastern part of Ventura County, about 30 minutes south of here through the winding orchards. When my boys were babies, I used to take long drives through all the farming communities, including Fillmore, so that they would nap, and so that I would have something peaceful and beautiful to stare at while I wandered aimlessly through Ventura County. I hold a special place in my heart for small towns. I was born in western Montana, grew up there, and I'm very interested in the things that happen here in our county. When I read about Fillmore's intention to move to districts due to a CVRA threat letter in the Ventura County Star, it piqued my interest as I volunteer for an election reform nonprofit group, and I lost my place, and and I have a particular passion for voting reform. I believe that our current voting system is at the root of many of our political problems, and that reform is helpful and necessary in most cases. It is my opinion, and the stated opinion of the group that I volunteer with, that the California Voting Rights Act is an extremely important and beneficial law that has helped underrepresented groups in California attain political power and representation in many areas where they had previously been unable to win seats as a result of plurality at large elections. The district transition has often helped disenfranchised groups, especially Latinos, achieve much-deserved representation. These are important wins, and they justify the existence of the CVRA and the need for its enforcement. However, I believe that the CVRA can be abused, and not every city is served by the transition to districts. Plurality at large is an inherently flawed system, but, like a broken clock, it occasionally gets things right. Fillmore's plurality at large system has recently produced representation that aligns with its California voting age population, or CVAP. But historically, it has not. Therefore, I propose that the best solution for providing just representation and bringing the city into compliance with the California Voting Rights Act is a proportional at-large system, such as proportional ranked choice voting. There are several options the city could take in responding to the CVRA threat letter, but before we address those options, let's establish a little background to give perspective on the available options. And if you're OCD, I apologize that the heading is on this page and the content is on the next page. It's driving me nuts, but I'm going to get through it. One important thing to know, the city may request a 90-day extension to the timeline in accordance with the California Elections Code 10010E3C. Any reasonable attorney should grant this extension, and doing so would allow the city more time to carefully evaluate its options, draw maps, or seek a settlement with the plaintiff. You do not have to move at this breakneck pace through the entire process. Another point is that the recent California State Supreme Court decision regarding Pico Neighborhood Association versus the City of Santa Monica, this is the Santa Monica case that people have talked about, it did overturn the city's appeal victory, but in doing so, it added a very important condition requiring that plaintiffs pursuing a CVR case not only demonstrate racially polarized voting, but they now must also demonstrate voting dilution. This adds additional research and costs to prosecuting or defending a CVRA case by raising the requirement that a plaintiff must prove. Specifically, plaintiffs must now show that there is a system that would improve the situation for the injured group. It's not enough just to implement it, it has to be shown to improve it. Fillmore's California voting age population, or CVAP, is roughly 2/3 Latino and 1/3 white. Given that the injured party in the CVRA threat letter has a 2-to-1 majority over the next largest group, it sets a very high bar to prove that there has been voting dilution. While historically underrepresented, Latinos' lack of representation does not appear to be due to the mathematical inability to elect representatives. If Latino voter turnout were higher than 50%, based on Fillmore's current CVAP statistics, they would have the voting power to elect all 5 seats and all other elected offices under the current plurality at large system. On October 24th, and I want to say that actually I thought Mr. Leonard's presentation was great, and I thought your presentation was great, and this is not a dig at all on National Demographics Corporation. They're doing their job. They appear to do it well. But on October 24th, Mr. Leonard of VP National Demographics Corporation stated that no city in California has successfully fought a CVRA letter, and that all other cities in Ventura County have moved to districts. However, many cities and governing bodies have resisted CVRA threat letters, and in many cases, they never hear back from the attorney. A few examples would be Port Hueneme, who is still using plurality at large. They have received no threat letter. Ojai, which conceded and then immediately in their first election voted to dissolve their districts and adopt a proportional system of representation. Richmond, California refused their threat letter. Fort Bragg, California settled. Palo Alto School District refused. San Luis Obispo refused, was sued again. Burbank has refused and is currently entering litigation. And Santa Monica, as you know, has refused and is currently litigating. The attorney who issued the CVRA threat letter to Fillmore has sent a number of threat letters to different cities recently, resulting in cities conceding and transitioning to districts. Most recently, he sent a nearly identical threat letter to the one Fillmore received to the city of Burbank. In the wake of the Santa Monica Supreme Court ruling, the city of Burbank's City Council has voted unanimously to ignore the letter and transition their city to a proportional system. In light of that, Mr. Dominguez has filed suit, and the parties will meet soon for their first hearing, where the threshold for proving damages is going to be established for Mr. Dominguez. And then the last piece that I want to bring up before we move on is that Kevin Shankman, who is the most experienced and aggressive attorney in the state pursuing CVRA litigation, contacted the city of Fillmore. This was discussed in the meeting on Tuesday, and asked for demographic information and information about the makeup of the city council. And upon receiving that data, he decided not to take any action against Fillmore. It can be speculated that some of the attorneys in California sending CVRA threat letters are looking for a quick payday and don't intend to sue if the city calls their bluff. Kevin Shankman is not one of those attorneys. He does his homework. He truly believes in the CVRA and the work he is doing. He does not bluff. He does not blow smoke. He would likely have sent a CVRA threat letter if he felt there was a violation worthy of a potential lawsuit. So options. Given the established background information and the need for the City Council to decide, I would like to enumerate 3 options facing the City of Fillmore for the benefit of the Council, its staff, and for the residents. Concede, resist, or settle. Option A is concede. In option A, the city chooses to concede to the threat letter sent by attorney Jason Dominguez and moves forward with district elections beginning in 2024. The city pays Mr. Dominguez roughly $37,000 to cover his fees, hires a demographer to draw up maps for the city's proposed districts, and absorbs an array of additional costs that come about as a result of moving to district elections. All told, it can easily cost $100,000 to make the initial transition. Once transitioning to districts, the city will face a redistricting process after every census and the associated costs involved with such a process. Aside from the costs associated with the transition to districts, the city must contend with the possibility of uncontested elections, or elections where no candidate can be found to represent a district. In similar circumstances, small towns forced to move to districts have trouble fielding candidates and have uncontested races 30% of the time. This is not good for voters to not have choice, and it's not good for democracy. If nobody comes forward seeking office, the district is left with no candidates, and a representative has to be appointed. So while conceding and moving to districts might protect the city of Fillmore from future CVRA threat letters, it is not necessarily in the best interest of the city, its voters, or its budget. Option B would be to resist. In option B, the city decides to contest Mr. Dominguez's CVA threat letter and responds with a stern letter from the city's attorney stating that the city does not believe that it is in violation of the California Voting Rights Act and asks Mr. Dominguez to provide further detail and analysis into the plaintiff's claim. This letter could include that Kevin Shankman, a noted CVRA lawyer with a very successful track record, looked into Fillmore's situation and decided there was no case. The city could argue that given the current makeup of the city council and the demographic composition of the city's CVAP, there is no case to be made that the injured party is unable to achieve acceptable levels of representation on the council. Latinos make up roughly 2/3 of the CVAP and 2/3 of the city council. Whites make up roughly 2/3 of the CVAP and roughly 1/3 of the CVAP and 1/3 of the city council. So where is the violation? If the city decides to resist Mr. Dominguez's CVRA threat letter, it would either see Mr. Dominguez drop his case against the city, and there would be no additional expenses, or Mr. Dominguez would make good on his threat and file suit against the city. Should Mr. Dominguez file suit, the city would be responsible for all of its related legal costs. If it loses, it would be liable for damages and fees incurred by Mr. Dominguez. If the city wins, it would still be responsible for its legal costs, unable to recoup those costs from Mr. Dominguez, as the CVRA protects the plaintiff and the plaintiff's attorney from damages in the instance of a loss. If the city were to win its case, it would set a precedent that might discourage other attorneys from sending CVRA threat letters. In the event that another threat letter was sent, the city would likely win again, denying future attorneys who send letters the prospect of recovering costs or fees. But it would not provide safe harbor from such threat letters. So it is entirely possible that another attorney could come along and start the whole process over. Which brings us to option C, to seek a settlement. In option C, the city decides to seek a settlement with Mr. Dominguez and the plaintiff. The city is not conceding to Mr. Dominguez's threat letter and, as such, is not liable for the $37,000 in fees to the attorney, but instead is able to negotiate an acceptable settlement that sees Mr. Dominguez able to recover some of his legal costs, as well as sparing the city from having to transition to district-based elections. A proposed settlement would include an admission from the city that its plurality-at-large system is a weak system for guaranteeing representation for protected groups. The city would state that although it is not currently in violation, it has been historically, and it wishes to transition to a better, more just system as defined by the CVRA. Because district elections result in uncontested elections as much as 30% of the time in similarly sized cities, the city proposes moving to a modified at-large system, such as proportional ranked choice voting, as allowed for in the CVRA. The similarly sized city of Albany, population 19,000, recently negotiated a similar settlement with attorney Kevin Schenkman and in 2022 held its first proportional ranked choice election, which yielded fantastic results. A settlement such as this provides a number of significant advantages over conceding or resisting the CVRA threat letter. It allows the city to avoid transitioning to districts. It replaces an antiquated and unjust system of plurality at large elections with a much better proportional system, and it provides protection from future CVRA threat letters for at least a few election cycles while the method is proven to produce just and representative electoral results. If the suit and the settlement are filed in conjunction and ruled on by a judge, the ruling allows the city to move to a proportional election system without having to adopt a city charter, and it shields the city from future CVRA threat letters until such time as historical data can either confirm or disprove the effectiveness of the settled upon solution. So in conclusion, the city of Fillmore, its city council, and its residents have a difficult decision ahead of them. Of the three options I've presented, none will be easy and none will be without cost or headache, but I believe there is a clear winner. I strongly urge the city to pursue a settlement with the plaintiff that includes the implementation of a proportional at-large system such as proportional ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is the fastest growing voting reform in the country, and for good reason. It encourages more candidates to run, provides voters with more options, and when implemented in a proportional form to elect representative bodies, such as a city council, it produces the most just and equitable results of any voting system in use today. And most importantly, it does not require districts. There's an opportunity for the Fillmore City Council to turn this lemon into lemonade and emerge from this stressful situation with a new and improved election system that both satisfies the requirements of the California Voting Rights Act and prevents the city from being forced to transition to an unwanted and likely ineffective district model. I wish you, the City Council, and the people of Fillmore the very best as you navigate this process, and I will be rooting for you the entire time. Thank you again for your time.
You did a pretty good job eating the time up, Paul.
Yeah, I know. I thought it was going to be shorter, but I guess I was vamped. Thank you.
And since we're done with public speakers, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we're going to ask questions again. Amanda, can you answer some of the questions that were? I'm sure he saw you writing away, so.
Absolutely. Well, first I want to say thank you to everyone who spoke. It reflects so well on your city and your community, your thoughtful comments. So let me cover the easy questions, which are, can we put the PowerPoint online? Yes.
In fact, I think we just put the PowerPoint.
It's already there? Wow. Amazing. So while the online tool will show you if there are issues with population balance of your map, you may still submit it. The reason why we process all of the publicly submitted maps is to be able to flag some of those issues that may occur. However, sometimes a map may not be balanced or may not be contiguous, but it still might prompt the council to have a really good idea about what at least one district should look like. So we don't hide anything, right? Everything goes on the table that's submitted by the public, but we do process it and highlight where there are submissions that fail to meet the basic requirements. There was a question about any changes to the mayoral selection process that is not part of this transition. So the council selecting the mayor would not be changed as part of this process. I want to highlight the comment also about protecting incumbents. As of January, there is a new law that would prohibit incumbents from being their addresses and their locations from being considered. So one advantage of getting this done before the end of the year is that we can consider which districts current council members are in. And we really do think that this is a matter of respecting voters' choices. So what that means is that we would not necessarily prefer drawing a district that would pair two council members with different election years, because that would require one of those council members to not be able to run. And so we prefer voters to always make those decisions and not lines on a map. Whether or not that is something, it's not something that's currently in the online map tool. However, when we do present all the maps at the next public hearing, we will identify which council members live in which districts for each of the proposed plans, so that can be part of the consideration. We also assign proposed election years to each of the districts for each plan. So that's something that will be on the table for discussion going forward. Some cities do choose to have maybe a general area or the block where they live highlighted. We don't really ever publish people's exact addresses, but sometimes we do highlight the blocks. I mean, in a small town, people know, right? But sometimes we can highlight those, but that would be at council's direction to NDC. Say, hey, if you want to label the blocks so that that's something available to the public, drawing maps, we can do that. Other than that, I think to the extent that you want to engage in further conversations about potential lawsuits, I think that that's something that should involve your council and perhaps occur in closed session. So is there anything else you'd like me to address?
Any other questions for?
I was curious about the settings that you played with on the map tool, whether those will now be default.
They should. Some of them should have already been. So on my notes are to go back and double check that. Sometimes the tools are quirky from one browser to another, so I double check it.
Okay.
Any other questions? She needs her glasses.
Yeah. Can you tell us, the last speaker is talking about the proportional at-large district. How does that differ from?
So the CVRA does not limit the correction to by district elections. It says you can solve these problems created by at-large elections either by moving to by district elections or an alternative system. So what Paul was referring to would fall under that category of the alternative system. And if that is something that the council wishes to look into, we can discuss that further. However, NDC is a districting and redistricting firm, so that's my expertise.
Would you be able to speak a little bit more about the proportional voting? Okay.
No, I'm not familiar with that. It might be the type of thing for a future meeting or closed session, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen other cities, instruct staff to put together a report or hold a study session on that issue. I'm trying to think which city. San Bruno up in Northern California, I believe, did a lot of research into it. I mean, you heard about Albany. This is definitely a Bay Area, more popular thing up in Silicon Valley too, where we actually see some of the cities with ranked choice voting and such.
Would you be able to describe at all in more detail the law that is going to go in effect January 1st? Is it just about not being able to favor currently elected officials, or is there more
That
to it?
is the only criteria change that would affect cities and counties. There are some changes to the outreach requirements and public recording requirements that would apply only to redistricting, so that wouldn't apply to you in this case. And then one of the other main things that's happening is all of the criteria you saw for cities and counties are being applied to school and special districts. So I heard that the Fillmore Unified District already made that change, so it won't be affected by that until after 2030. So yeah, there's a lot of, as you all know, every year, the California legislature is passing, 800 laws or something, so.
Have we broached with Mr. Dominguez an extension?
I haven't talked to him personally at all.
Yeah, when this first came out, we did reach out to Mr. Dominguez, one, for extension. We also asked for him put this on the ballot for the individual residents to vote on the matter, put it up for the election, hold off. He said no, no, no on everything. We initially reached out to him when we first got the letter.
Okay. I would like to maybe see if an extension, we could request an extension with the intent to talk a little bit more about this proportional voting, and or add another meeting to our current schedule to be able to discuss it more at length, so that we have the full picture.
Can we do that or not?
I don't know why not.
I don't know, can we do that now? I think we have to do it when it's not this type of agenda, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be better.
Have to be during a regular council meeting.
Right. I think it'd be better off waiting until the next regular council meeting, possibly having a closed session discussion about that, or alternatively, if it's part of the open session, having that on the agenda if it's something to be discussed further.
Yeah, I don't think we can do it. There's nowhere on here to do that.
Right.
So.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought the city manager indicated that the request for an extension was already made and he declined.
That's the way I understand it too, but maybe with this new stipulation that we're exploring an additional option that would meet the intent of CVRA, to at least broach that, so that we know whether or not we have to cram in another meeting to suit the unrealistic timeline, or to make a more reasonable timeline.
I think this is going to have to go before Tiffany,
Right.
correct? So, we can't answer the question right now.
Right.
Correct, Dave, or Michael?
I understand what's going on, so
Okay.
I see some heads nodding, but we can't make direction.
Right.
I got you.
Okay.
Okay.
And any other questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting to the next special scheduled meeting at 6:30 on Tuesday, November 14th. Meeting adjourned.